So, here's a question many of you might have. What is happening in Malaysia? In just about 1 week, the Malaysia you knew is now completely different. How did this happen? And where did Mahathir go? I'm Cui Wen, and I'm going to give you a quick rundown on what happened in Malaysia. Mahathir Mohamad was the world's oldest Prime Minister at 94 years old. He was made PM in 1981 and retired in 2003. But he took on the role again in 2018 after sweeping the elections with the Pakatan Harapan coalition. On February 24, 2020, Mahathir resigned. At around 5:30 PM on the same day, Mahathir met with the king again, who accepted his resignation and appointed him as interim PM. And it was a short-lived position, because in just 5 days, Malaysia's king announced this man, 72-year-old Muhyiddin Yassin, as Malaysia's new PM. We'll talk more about who Malaysia's 8th Prime Minister is later, but now, let's get into what was happening around the time Mahathir resigned. After all, it was a pretty dramatic move. All the exciting events that happened over the past few days were basically triggered by the collapse of Malaysia's ruling coalition, Pakatan Harapan. Okay lah, it wasn't that dramatic. In the lead up to the events on February 24th, there were already speculations that PH wasn't super solid. But before you get into that, here's a crash course on who the key players are and what you need to know about this coalition. So, the PH coalition comprised of these 4 parties. Bersatu, led by Mahathir, PKR, led by Anwar, DAP, led by Lim Guan Eng, and Amanah, led by Mat Sabu. In May 2018, they famously defeated the previous ruling coalition, Barisan Nasional, which was then led by UMNO. One of the key parties of the PH coalition was Bersatu, which Mahathir was chairman of. That's also the party that Muhyiddin, the current PM, is president of. The other party that's been getting a lot of attention is PKR, whose president is Anwar Ibrahim, a man commonly recognized as Mahathir's successor, because Mahathir said so himself. Yet another key player is the guy who was previously seen as Anwar's protege, Azmin Ali. He was in PKR too, but he was sacked for several reasons, which we'll talk about later. Okay? Crash course done. So, it's February 21st, Friday. The PH Council meet to discuss succession and get Mahathir to set a concrete date to step down. No date gets cemented. Skip ahead to February 23rd, Sunday. UMNO and Bersatu suddenly hold a series of emergency meetings. There were also rumours that Azmin Ali intended to lead a breakaway faction of MPs from the PKR. This fueled further speculation that Mahathir intended to take Bersatu out of the PH coalition, which, as a result, will cause it to collapse. This actually comes true on February 24th, when Bersatu President Muhyiddin announced that the party would be leaving PH. To make things even more complicated, Azmin Ali's plans to take some MPs away from PKR as part of a political coup were also discovered. And so, he was sacked. So this, on top of everything else, has resulted in calls for the Malaysian Parliament to be dissolved. So, who gets to decide if Parliament will be dissolved? That will be the king, who already has his hands full, accepting resignation letters, giving free chicken to journalists, talk to 222 MPs to decide who will command the majority of Parliament. So Muhyiddin has been appointed as PM by the king, but a vote of no confidence to be taken in parliament has been proposed by his opponents. Basically, it's a vote to determine whether he has adequate support of the majority of MPs. This is what the ousted PH has tried to push for, and parliament was supposed to come together on March 9 to vote, but this has been postponed by Muhyiddin till May 18. This postponement gives him more time to attract MPs to his side to form a majority. Muhyiddin now leads the new ruling coalition, Perikatan Nasional. So, what's going on now? Clearly, Malaysia is divided. Imagine this, a majority of Malaysians voted for a coalition that suddenly cannot rule overnight. Essentially, 48.3% of Malaysians voted for the PH coalition in May 2018. Just 2 years in, they are no longer the ruling coalition. How will people react to this overnight change? Will they be salty about it? Here's the weird thing. This saltiness was already around when PH was still in charge. Here's why. Since the PH government took over, there had been actions and statements that led people to think that BUMIPUTERA issues were going to be ignored. BUMIPUTERA issues, in this context, refer to affirmative action policies. Affirmative what? Simply put, these are policies that take into consideration an individual's traits, such as their religion and their ethnicity, in order to increase opportunities for them. This is to support disadvantaged or marginalized social groups. So 2/3 of the PH coalition's MPs were non-Malays, and to the country's Malays and Muslims, it seemed quite obvious that the BUMIPUTERA policies might be cast aside in favour of equality for all. Out of 92 MPs from DAP, PKR and Amanah, 59 are non-Muslims, while only 33 are Malays or Muslims. The Chinese-dominated DAP has one sole Malay MP. So there was clearly a decline of Malay support for the recently collapsed PH government. More than 40% of Mahathir's ministers were non-Malay Muslims, compared to just 1/5 of Najib's cabinet. With Muhyiddin now chosen as Malaysia's 8th Prime Minister, his appointment has been cheered by the so-called majority. Muhyiddin has been described as a Malay loyalist with traditional values. He was Najib's deputy PM before he got sacked, after he fell out with his bosku. The fact is, the Malay and Muslim bloc makes up 60% of the population in Malaysia. Chinese make up 30%, while the remainder are Indians and Eurasians. Political disagreements were really about the non-Malay majority Pakatan Harapan having a disproportionate control over the Malay majority population, and the Malay-based UMNO PAS bloc asserting itself now. There is economic disparity in Malaysia, and it can be traced to run along racial lines. So there was a need for BUMIPUTERA economic empowerment. It was also said that any government in Malaysia ignoring this disparity would not survive. So basically, right, when some government officials try to call for an end to race-based policies without considering economic data, it's seen as them not giving BUMIPUTERA issues the attention it deserves. So by framing the matter in this manner, rival politicians are able to appeal to the Malay and Muslim crowd more strongly. And now, with the PH coalition on defence, there has been a reassertion of Malay dominance. And while the King's reasons for naming Muhyiddin as the new PM are unknown, it is a fact that the ruling coalition went from multiracial to predominantly Malay overnight. So, how has Singapore responded to our neighbours' exciting events? Here's what former diplomat Bilahari Kausikan had to say on the matter. A distracted Malaysian government, not so good for Singapore, even though the old fox has been outfoxed. Meanwhile, in true diplomatic fashion, PMD congratulated his new counterpart. So whatever Mahathir's succession plans were, who they involved and who they didn't involve, it's unlikely we'll ever get to see them unfold. But then again, if the past week's events were anything to go by, Mahathir and Malaysia is always full of surprising developments.